Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Pruitt. Hope you all are doing well. I'm unbelievable as always. And right now, this is that time of year where I tend to shoot our holiday family photo, if you will. And yeah, it was a little bit late this year getting that photo shot. We literally got it shot the last day of 2023. And I shared it as I normally would on my social medias and so forth. Easy to find, @_Pruitt. And I put it out there to you, the community that supports me and follow me. Thank you for that. I asked if you wanted me to do a bit of a shot breakdown as far as how I captured this shot this particular year. I haven't done this before. I believe I did a reel last year just showing a bit of the behind the scenes, but I figured maybe someone wants to know the thought process in setting up the photograph and then just going from there. So without further ado, not going to take up much of your time. Let's go ahead and just hop into Photoshop and let you see what's going on with the photograph. So I'm just going to hit this button over here. All right, so here is Photoshop, and this is the photo. The original photo is down on this bottom layer here. So let me just take that away, turn that off. So that's the original photo. You can barely see the differences there. And this is the final image there. Can you see the difference? Just a few things that I retouched and fixed, so forth. All right, so the challenge with this is we're shooting this in the stairwell here in the home. So light is the big challenge there because there's a little tiny overhead light there on the stairwell. I use that to make sure I don't trip and fall going up and down the stairs, but that's not enough light for a photograph. So I wanted to make sure I get plenty of light hitting that stairwell and lighting everybody effectively, but not necessarily making them look like a bunch of creepy monsters or anything like that. So light positioning was key. So off on the right hand side, and I will give you some links in the description to some of the lights that I use here because there are very particular lights that are used. But off here on the left hand side, let me get my brush tool here. On the left hand side here, I have a Stella Pro CLX 10 mounted, and I have it set to about 100% power because again, I just needed to have as much brightness as I can get. But I didn't aim it directly at my face, because if I aimed it directly at my face or any of our faces, it's going to be a really, really harsh light. So what I did was just sort of aimed it going more so towards this wall right here, so it'll give a little bit of a bounce. So I aimed it towards that wall and angled it going upwards like that. And that gives me a nice softer light because it's sort of bouncing around. I didn't put a soft box on this light. I literally just said, I'm going to go with a bare bulb, point it in a certain direction and let it bounce, and that'll start a bit of a diffusion because of the inverse square law. All right, so that was one light. Next, I had to consider, all right, the background. And if you look a little bit closer, I didn't really do too much edit work on here. But if you look a little bit closer, there's something right there behind one of my hardhead sons right here. And that is another floor light. That light is one of my favorites, quite honestly. I've had that light for, I don't know, I guess since 2020. Yeah, since 2020 when the pandemic came in and I decided to do more lighting for my workspace here as far as producing content and whatnot. And those are Dazne desktop lights or key lights that you could put up on the front of your desk and right behind your camera if you're doing a webcam presentation, and it'll light you up beautifully. You can get a set of 2 of them. I think I got a set of 2 of them back then for like $200 or something like that. Elgato makes the same type of lights, but they're a little more expensive. And but these here, they work really well as key lights for the front of your subject, but I didn't use it as that. I use it as a floor light. I have a little Platypod mount, like a flat tripod, if you will, that I mounted this light to, and I put it back behind me in most of my shots in the podcast. And that is the thing. I just did the same thing here in this scenario and put it back behind us. and turned it on, changed the color temperature on it to something a little bit cooler. And then I stuck a purple gel on the top of it. I just grabbed a little A clamp. Do I have an A clamp over here? Don't see an A clamp, but I'll put one up. I grabbed an A clamp and grabbed the gel and just clamped the gel to the front of that light. And that's what gives you this purple hue shining behind us. I figured I wanted to go with the purple hue because, you know, clearly we have a theme going on here. Everybody's wearing purple except for the dogs. Well, Biscuit's not wearing one, but it looks like Kylo is wearing a purple, what do you call it, collar. So he's good to go. Next up, so then you have to think about your camera settings. So you have to look at, all right, what is your focal length going to be? What is your aperture going to be? Shutter speed, so on and so forth. For me, ideally, when I'm doing portraits, I like to shoot no slower than 1/125th of a second, because I find that every now and then people just barely move and it'll blur. You know, even just the slightest movement will blur, let alone with your camera being on a tripod and you hitting that shutter. Sometimes just the actual mirror mechanism in your camera will give just a micro jitter of your camera and screw up the image. So I've always found that going at least 1/125th of a second on shutter speed is my go-to. Your mileage may vary, but that's what I roll with here. So I set it to that, but then you have to think about your actual aperture. Again, we're working in a low light scenario, even though this is in our home, but from a photography standpoint, the lighting is not bright enough. So I wanted to set my aperture to something like maybe f4, or even a little bit more wide open than that if I'm able to. I believe I shot this with the 24-70 f2.8, but I don't think I shot it in f2.8 because, yes, having a shallow depth of field looks great, but you don't want a shallow depth of field in this particular shot because I need to get everybody in focus as much as I can. And if you look a little bit closer, my son here, he starts to fall out of focus a little bit, but for the most part, he's okay. So you have to really consider that depth of field. And again, I know people love the bokeh and all of that stuff, but it doesn't work for every dadgum shot. So consider your aperture and your depth of field. So that's good to go. Set the camera up on a tripod and use the Canon Connect app. I shot with the Canon R5C and used the Canon Connect app, set it up on my phone, connect to it via Wi-Fi and so forth. Framed my shot before I sat down, and then I sat down and set the shutter drive mode to be a 10-second timer. So when I hit the shutter on my phone, the camera beeps for 10 seconds. And at the 10th second, it snaps the photograph. So again, we've been doing this since 2020. So everybody knows the procedure to look at the camera. You hear the beeps, you'll see the little tally light going, and it'll speed up right as it gets closer to the 1 second time to shoot. And we smile and it snaps the photograph. If you look closer here, you may see my phone is in my hands. No, you can't see it. I hit it pretty well that time, but sometimes I have the phone right there in my hands. So you can't see it, or I'll stick it right beside me out of the frame, out of the shot, because again, I have 10 seconds to do this. The next question, the most frequently asked question, is the dogs. Well, fortunately, Kylo and Biscuit, they do fairly well with the sit command. You know, I got to give them credit. Biscuit is a little bit new to it. We've only had him about 2 years now versus Kylo been around almost 8 years now. But yeah, the sit command tends to work. So we just told Kylo to pop up there and sit down, and he sat there. And Biscuit didn't quite get it, but eventually it took him being held on Queen Pruitt's lap, and he just chilled out. And again, we just snapped a couple shots and came up with something that would work for us. Lastly was the retouching. Again, this was the original shot. Oh, I guess I could take all of that other stuff off. Let's see there. There we go. So this is the original shot here. And this is just the other side of the wall that goes down to our living room area. And I didn't like how that looked there, but I figured, you know what, I could just fill that in with similar color from the wall, and that's all I did. I just grabbed a little bit of the clone stamp there and just filled all of this in to make it neater. And I didn't spend a ton of time on it because it's not totally perfect when you look right here. So I highly suggest to you, if you're sending this out for paying clients or what have you, really refine this particular edge right here on the shoulder. I tried to refine it a little bit by using a layer mask there. So if I hit D on the keyboard to give me my default colors, change the brush, change it to black paint, and as I paint on, you see that's what it used to look like. Okay, and put it back and reveal like so. You should use a soft brush, not a hard brush like what I'm using right now. So let's make this brush softer. Now change the flow on it some too. So we'll do that. We'll make the brush hardness really soft, and then just sort of clean it up like so. And that looks a little bit better. It ain't perfect, but you get the gist. You can get in there and make some selections and clean this up a little bit better in your photograph. All right, but yeah, that is it. This shot, it's a lot of fun to do these every year. We started doing this once we moved out here to California back in 2019. And the first one we took it had my mom, my sister, my nephew. It was all of us in there, and similar experience. Just find a spot to pose and so forth and get your lighting right. I really enjoy playing around with lighting in situations like this, and it's very useful in this particular shot, having that key light where it is, because look at how we get the catch lights in the dog's eyes here, the catch lights in dog's eyes down here, Biscuit's eyes, my eyes. And catch lights, man, I don't think y'all get it, but catch lights in photography goes a long way. It really does just give life to the person in the portrait. So if you can strategically place that light to where they can still have catch lights in the eyes, your shots are going to look so much better, and your people are going to be so much happier because they're going to look alive in the photograph. All right, so that is it. Again, I'm going to have links in the description below to the lights that I use. You don't necessarily have to use that particular light for the key light, the CLX 10. Let me switch out of here. The CLX 10 from Stella Pro. I know everybody can't afford that light, so there are other options out there, such as the Godox SL60, I believe. That would work totally fine. It's bright enough, and I'll put a link to that as well. And of course, these will all be affiliate links. All right, folks, I've talked long enough. I hope this was helpful for those of you that were curious and interested in the breakdown of this photograph. So yeah, hit me up if you have any other questions. Just leave them down in the comments below, or just shoot me a question over on social media. I'm ant_Pruitt on pretty much all of them. Y'all take care. I shall see you next time. Deuces.